Hello and welcome to today's Learn at Lunchtime program from the State Museum of Pennsylvania. I am Beth Erickson. The topic today is fireflies and lightning bugs, Pennsylvania's state insect. And with us is Joe Franckiewicz, Environmental Education Specialist at Raccoon Creek State Park. Joe received a bachelor's degree in environmental science and education from Juniata College and has been an educator for the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources since 2020. Hello, Joe, and thank you for presenting today.
Hi, Beth. It's good to be back with your Lunch and Learn for the second time. It's good to be back.
It's great. Yes, you had a great time last time, so I'm glad you came back. So we're excited to find out more. So why don't you start with telling us about a little bit about yourself and what you do at Raccoon Creek State Park?
Of course, so I am an environmental education specialist here at Raccoon Creek. So my entire job is putting on programming for public groups, private groups, visitors that come to the park on a wide range of topics, including things like fireflies, but also the natural, historical, and cultural resources that are available here at Raccoon Creek State Park.
So the topic today is Pennsylvania's state insect called both the firefly and the lightning bug. I believe the official legislation refers to it as a firefly, but what name do you think best fits this insect?
I personally grew up calling them lightning bugs. There's kind of a shift away from that, especially with younger generations, and we'll kind of talk about that in the presentation, but I'm a little biased. I grew up calling them fireflies, or lightning bugs rather, and um, I want to continue calling them lightning bugs, but it can be hard. I'm going to call them fireflies during this presentation because it's easier.
Well, speaking of your presentation, let's get to that to learn more. So while you get set up, let me remind the audience that this webinar is being recorded. If you have a comment, please place it in the chat and we'll respond as soon as possible. Please submit your questions about the presentation in the Q&A, and Joe will answer as many as he can after the presentation is complete. All right, so Joe, let's get you set up.
All right, 1 second.
And if you're ready, go ahead and begin.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about fireflies and lightning bugs, which, as Beth mentioned, is the official state insect of Pennsylvania. So before we jump into these really amazing bugs, I want to talk about what fireflies actually are. So they're not actually flies, but they are a beetle. If we look at a firefly, they have these hard covers on their wings called elytrae, which are these hard wing covers. So they are technically a beetle, and all fireflies belong to the family Lampyridae. Worldwide, there's over 2,200 species, but here in North America, in the US and Canada, there's about 165 species that can be found across the continent. And while they are famous for their ability to glow in the dark, not every single species can do this. We'll talk about the dark fireflies in a little bit, but not every firefly has the capability to glow. However, most of the glowing species that live here in North America live east of the Mississippi River. So we have a really high diversity of glowing and flashing fireflies here on the East Coast as when compared to the West Coast. And so we kind of hinted at this, but is it a firefly? Is it a lightning bug? There's truly no difference between the two names. Fireflies and lightning bugs are both the same thing. You may just call it something different depending on where you grew up or how you were raised. They are the same thing. So you may prefer one name over the other, but at the end of the day, they are both the same thing. You may also hear people refer to them as glowworms, which is another name that sometimes gets thrown around, but typically a glowworm is going to be either a flightless female or it's going to be a larva, and we'll delve into that when we talk about the life cycle of these insects. But I thought this was a pretty interesting map. This comes from North Carolina State University, and it's a map that kind of shows where people prefer to use the name lightning bug, where people prefer to use the term firefly, and where we get this overlap. And so we can see here in Pennsylvania, most Pennsylvanians prefer the name lightning bug. As I kind of mentioned, younger generations tend to go towards Firefly. It's a quicker name that kind of rolls off the tongue better. And it's kind of getting to the point where fewer and fewer people call them lightning bugs, but uh, on the East Coast, there are still a good amount of people that refer to them as lightning bug. And this is also our state insect. Specifically, we chose one type of firefly to represent Pennsylvania, and that would be this insect right here. This is called the Pennsylvania firefly. Scientific name is Photurus pennsylvanica. And this was designated our state insect in 1974. And in fact, we were one of the first states to adopt a state insect. And this was initiated by students at Highland Park Elementary in Delaware County. They found out that there was a lightning bug that was named after the state of Pennsylvania. And they put a lot of work into writing to their representatives, and it made it through the legislature. And this insect got designated our state insect. We were also the first state to pick the firefly as its state insect, which I am very thrilled about. I love that Pennsylvania has such unique state symbols. I was curious about how many states picked the honeybee for their state insect, and at least 19 states picked the European honeybee as their state insect, which is not even native to North America. So I think it's really cool that we decided to be unique and show something that's not only native to Pennsylvania, but is a beautiful representation of our state. Since then, Indiana and Tennessee have also adopted fireflies as their state insects, but Pennsylvania is the only one that has Photurus pennsylvanica as their state insect. So we'll be answering some of these questions that you may have about these insects, and the first one may be, well, why do they glow? And while it's not there's a lot of theories, but there's a few different reasons why we think that fireflies glow in the dark. Number one, first and foremost, it's going to be to attract a mate. So some animals like birds, they sing. Some animals like deer, they fight each other. But fireflies, they glow to attract a mate. And their flash pattern is recognized by females. So the males will give a specific flash pattern. The females will recognize that. She'll answer with her lantern, and that's how their courtship works. So females will also flash to answer the males. Sometimes males flash at each other to compete and kind of show how vigorous and healthy they are, so they'll actually flash at other males. Males will also sometimes flash if they're rejected by a female. These are called rejection flashes. They may also do this to warn predators that they're toxic, and most species of fireflies contain these toxins that taste really bad. We call this an aposematic coloration. They have this bright, showy coloration to warn predators that they're toxic and they taste very bad. And so this bright flashing light could be a warning to predators saying, if you eat me, you're going to regret it. We'll kind of talk about some of the Photurus species that do this, but some fireflies actually flash to lure in prey. I don't want to steal the thunder from that because it's a really cool process, but some fireflies will use their lantern as a lure. Sometimes, and if you've ever gone out and caught lightning bugs, you may notice that some of them start to flash like crazy when they're stuck in a jar. And that's what we call an alarm flash. It's to warn the other lightning bugs in the area that there's a predator, and that rapid flashing is an alarm. So now that we know why they glow, let's get into the how they glow. So a good chunk of lightning bugs are bioluminescent. Now, there are some species that don't do this, but the bioluminescent fireflies and lightning bugs have these special light-emitting organs on their abdomens. We call it the lantern. And inside this lantern, there is this really fascinating and still somewhat poorly understood chemical reaction that goes on. So there's a chemical inside of that lantern called luciferin. And this luciferin binds with an enzyme called luciferase. And when these two chemicals combine in the presence of oxygen, magnesium, and ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is an energy molecule. It creates light. Some more recent research shows that there are chemicals like nitric oxide, octopamine, and hydrogen peroxide that help fireflies and lightning bugs switch this lantern on and off. So the reaction's still not fully understood, but we know that these chemicals play a hand in it. And although we don't fully understand it, it's really fascinating. This reaction produces a lot of light, but no heat. Uh, it's a 90% efficient reaction, meaning that 90% of this reaction goes into producing light, while 10% is lost to heat. Uh, if we compare that to an incandescent light bulb, it's pretty much the exact opposite. An incandescent light bulb gives off about 10% light, and about 90% of it is lost to the environment in heat. So this is an incredibly efficient reaction. And luciferin itself is a really fascinating molecule, and we've had great strides in science and medicine in using luciferin. So some really neat applications that luciferin is used for is it can be used to detect cancer cells. It could be used as a tracer to find cancerous cells. It can also be used in blood banks to help check the freshness of blood in those blood banks. At crime scenes, it could be used to detect trace amounts of blood. It will glow in the presence of blood. And what's great is in the past, in order to do these incredible things, people would have to go out and capture lightning bugs, send them to laboratories to extract that luciferin. But nowadays, we can synthetically produce this in a laboratory. So there's no need to collect wild lightning bugs. We can actually recreate luciferin in a lab and do these amazing, medical and scientific applications with it. So now that we understand the why, the how, and the chemistry that goes into it, let's talk about some of the lightning bugs that we might encounter in North America. So we can break them up into several groups. We have the dark fireflies, the flashing fireflies, the glowing fireflies, glowworms, and those are just different categories. If we want to talk about genre of fireflies, so the different genus of fireflies in North America, we have Photurus, Photinus. I think it's a little confusing, Photurus and Photinus. There's Pyractomina, there's Phausis, there's Lucidota, Elychnia, and Pyropyga. We're not going to talk about all of these in detail. And one of the unfortunate things about lightning bugs is a lot of these species go by their scientific names, and a lot of them don't have common names. So you'll be hearing me throwing a lot of Latin around, and it's because a lot of these species don't have common names assigned to them. But we'll start by talking about the dark fireflies. So the dark fireflies are active during the day. They include the genre Lucidota, Elychnia, and Pyropyga, and the adults don't glow. Now, the larvae do glow, and that's one shared characteristic among all species of lightning bugs. Everything in that Lampyridae family glows as a larva. So they may develop into an adult that has no lantern and no capability to glow, but they will all glow as larvae. And since they don't have a lantern to attract their mates, they actually rely on chemical cues. You'll notice on a lot of these different species, especially the Lucidota, they have huge antennae that they use for sniffing out these chemical cues. So they'll actually communicate via smell. And we'll jump into the glowworms. Glowworm is kind of a odd one because it's not an actual scientific clade of insects. So generally a glowworm is what we call a firefly that cannot fly. So these are often going to be the females of some species, or all of the larvae of every single Lampyridae is going to be flightless, but they still glow. The term glowworm can also refer to other glowing insects like railroad worms, which is that insect in the lower right-hand corner with that cool glowing railroad track pattern on it. Or in New Zealand, there are New Zealand glowworms. They hang from the roofs of caves and they make these really beautiful blue strings of lights. And that's not a firefly. That's actually a type of gnat larva. Glowworms, the name glow, meaning that they don't flash. rather they produce a steady glow of light. So they're not going to be blinking like the adult male lightning bugs of some species. They're going to have one steady glow. Now we'll go into the flashing fireflies. These are the ones that we're probably most familiar with here in Pennsylvania. So the photinus are very small. These are only about a ½ inch long or smaller. So these are teeny tiny little guys. And they're the ones that kind of come out early. They come out at dusk and they'll go into the night, but these are the ones that you'll start to notice right at sunset. And they produce this yellow greenish flash. Then we have the Pyractomina. These are also pretty small. They're about the same size as Photinus, and they're mostly active later into the night. We can tell them apart from the Photinus because they have this raised ridge on the middle of their pronotum, which is the shield that covers their head. And their flash, I like to compare to the embers jumping off of a campfire. It's going to be this orange amber colored campfire-like color. And a lot of Pyractomina are going to be up in the treetops, whereas the Photinus will go out into meadows and grassy areas and be closer to the ground. Pyractomina like to hang out in the treetops. Then we have the Photorus. This is what the Pennsylvania lightning bug is. And these are fairly large. They can get up to 1 inch long. So these are fairly large lightning bugs. We can distinguish them from other lightning bug species by their hunched shoulders, and they have a light stripe that runs down each of their wing covers. So we can see in this close-up photo here, there's a light stripe that goes down either of the elytria or the wing covers. Their flash is going to be brighter and greener than Photinus, and they will blink later into the night. And what's interesting about Photorus is they'll actually prey on other fireflies. And it's going to be the females that do this. And it's really fascinating. So I mentioned this a little earlier on, but lightning bugs produce these chemicals in their body that taste really bad to predators. However, Photorus can't produce these chemicals on their own. They have to steal them from other lightning bug species. So what the females will do is they'll crawl out onto a blade of grass and they'll wait for a male from another species of firefly to start blinking. And she'll mimic that flash pattern from the male to draw him in. And when he gets a little too close, she'll grab that male and consume him, absorb those chemicals into her body, and pass them off to her offspring. And these females are called femme fatales. They do attract the males of other species to get those chemicals, but it's a really fascinating process because she can't produce her own chemicals, or she can, just not in large enough quantities to ward off predators. Then we have the glowing fireflies. These are very fascinating ones. Phausis is going to be the most famous of these species, and these are tiny fireflies. We're talking less than 1/4 long. And some species of Phausis don't glow at all. But the ones that do make this really neat blue-green color. And the males will fly very low and very slow against the ground, all the while glowing this blue-green color. And probably the most famous species of Phausis is going to be the blue ghost lightning bug, which lives in the southern Appalachian Mountains, and it'll just fly low and slow with that greenish blue glow, and it's called the blue ghost. So now we'll get into the life cycle of lightning bugs. So they are an insect and they do have a life cycle. And they start out like many other insects as an egg. So the females will lay their eggs either on top of the soil or just below the soil, oftentimes in the leaf litter, and they like to go in damp areas of soil. After about 2 to 3 weeks, those eggs will hatch, and it's kind of cool when the eggs are ready to hatch, they'll actually start glowing. So they'll glow even before they're born, in a sense. But about 2 to 3 weeks after being laid, they'll hatch into a larva. And that's what this photo on the lower left-hand corner is. That grub-looking thing, that is the larva. So if you're ever gardening and you see something that looks like that, it's very good to have those in your garden because they eat a lot of things that you don't want in your garden, like snails and slugs. But that's what they look like as a larva. And they could spend up to 1 to 2 years as a larva. So they'll actually overwinter as a larva for many of these species. They'll spend a long time in this stage. Once that time's up, they'll go into a pupa, which is what the lower right-hand corner is, that white exoskeleton-looking thing. That is the pupa. And they'll sit in that pupa for 1 to 3 weeks. And again, sometimes if a predator gets close to that pupa, it'll start to glow as a warning to say, hey, I'm stuck in this pupa, but I still taste pretty bad. After that 1 to 3 week period, they'll emerge from the pupae as an adult. And the adults only live for 3 to 4 weeks. They spend most of their life as a larva. The adults do not live that long. They only have the summer. So 3 to 4 weeks as an adult, and the cycle continues. Now, lightning bugs are declining, and people are across the board saying, yeah, I'm seeing less lightning bugs now than I was as a child. Um, there's actually not a whole lot of science to back this up because lightning bug surveying is still fairly new. And in the past few decades, or in decades prior, people weren't really reporting lightning bug numbers. But people are sort of looking back on their childhoods and thinking, I remember there being more of these around when I was a kid. And many people have these fond childhood memories of seeing their yard full of lightning bugs in the summertime. And there are a few different ideas for what's causing this decline in lightning bugs. So the first is going to be habitat loss and habitat degradation. So lightning bugs need moist habitats like wetlands, streams, and damp fields. They don't like to be in the water, but they like to be near water. And so the draining of wet areas can impact lightning bug habitat. People rake up their leaves every single fall, and inside of that leaf litter can be the larval lightning bugs. The females lay their eggs in that leaf litter, and by raking them up, putting them in garbage bags, and having them hauled off by the city, you are transporting lightning bugs away from your backyard. Drought, especially as climate change becomes more severe and more severe droughts are noticed, that can also impact lightning bugs, which need that moist soil and moist leaf litter. Some species require coastal habitat. So as storms become worse, coastal storms, the loss of different coastal habitats, that can affect certain species of lightning bugs that live along the coast. And in fact, this insect right here, this is the Bethany Beach firefly. It's named so because it lives near Bethany Beach, Delaware. It has a very specific habitat. It lives in the wetlands that occur in sand dunes along the Atlantic coast. So those are called interdunal tidal wetlands. So it's freshwater wetlands that occur between sand dunes along the oceanic coast, a very hyper-specific habitat. And the reason why Bethany Beach fireflies are becoming more and more rare is because we are losing that habitat to storm surges and tropical storms, hurricanes, oceanfront development, things like that. This insect right here, this is called the loopy 5 firefly. It lives in Tennessee, in Kentucky, and pretty much nowhere else on Earth. It's called the loopy 5 because it'll go blink, 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 5 blinks in a circle. So it'll make this loop of 5 blinks. It's only known to live in a handful of habitats, one of which got converted into golf course. And so it does not live in that area anymore. And so that's another example of development impacting lightning bug habitat. One of the few places where this lightning bug lived is now a golf course where there are none. Another threat that's facing lightning bugs is going to be light pollution. So this is any excess light that comes off of homes, off of street lights, from car headlights, billboards, outdoor lights, anything like that. Artificial light can make it really difficult for fireflies to communicate. The males are trying to get the attention of the females, and if their tiny little lantern is overshrouded by some floodlights outside, the female might not see the male, or the male might not see the female's response. And so it makes it harder for them to communicate, and therefore it makes it harder for them to reproduce and lay eggs. So it may actually prevent fireflies from breeding. It might also make them more vulnerable to predators. If a predator can't see the lightning bug's lantern, it is going to lose its protection. A predator might just see an insect flying through the air, not notice the blinking pattern, and then it just completely gets eaten. Another threat would be pesticides and herbicides. So as we talked about their life cycle, you may recall that they spend most of their life as a larva in and under the soil. And lightning bug larvae eat a lot of soft-bodied invertebrates, things like earthworms and snails and slugs. So if you spray an herbicide on top of a leaf and a snail eats that leaf, that snail is now full of herbicide. If a lightning bug larva eats that snail, it's going to be uptaking that herbicide, and they can die from that. So there is a bioaccumulation that happens in the food chain where they can get sick from exposure to pesticides and herbicides. Herbicides might also remove the vegetation that they need for shelter, and so you're, using herbicides and pesticides, and you're getting rid of lightning bug habitat. The larvae and the females that are flightless can't disperse from sites treated with pesticides. They don't have wings, and so they're pretty much stuck there, and they have to cope with these harsh conditions, and sometimes they don't survive. And so males, they can just go to a completely new location, but the females and the larvae, they're grounded and they're stuck with those pesticides and herbicides. So what can we do to help these insects? Well, we can maintain habitat for them by planting native plants, maybe leaving some undisturbed soil, maybe leaving a patch of leaves on the ground. I'm not saying you don't have to rake at all, but maybe leave a little corner of your yard as lightning bug habitat where you can leave some leaf litter for invertebrates to thrive in. You can provide a water source or some shade if possible. You can avoid using pesticides and herbicides on your property if possible. You can also reduce light pollution by turning off your outdoor lights, especially during the lightning bug breeding season. You can put your lights on a motion sensor or a timer. You can close your curtains at night. You can dim or filter your outdoor lights. And these would be especially effective during that time when lightning bugs are trying to reproduce. You can also help by recording Firefly data. You can participate in a community science project. You can take your friends into the yard and count lightning bugs, and we'll get into community science in a little bit. You can also raise awareness about firefly conservation. This will become available for folks to watch if you want to share this with people, or just share what you learned today with your family and friends. Let them know that there are ways to help these insects. So community science is the act of everyday people, regardless of our scientific background, collecting scientific data. And so you can contribute to lightning bug knowledge by photographing them and putting them on iNaturalist, which is a huge community science database. You can also organize a lightning bug count, where you go out with some friends, you count the lightning bugs you see, try to determine the species, the weather, when they're calling, how late into the night they're flashing. And two organizations that you can do that through are the Firefly Atlas or the Massachusetts Audubon Society. And you don't have to live in Massachusetts to give them your data. And then one question I get is, where's the best place to see lightning bugs? And there are kind of three big spots in North America that are really good for seeing lightning bugs. Probably the most famous of them is Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee and North Carolina. People flock to this park every June to see the synchronous fireflies. Allegheny National Forest in Northwest Pennsylvania is also a really good spot. There are synchronous fireflies, so these are fireflies that all flash in unison together. And people, again, flock from all over to the Allegheny National Forest to see that as well. And kind of a hidden gem is Congaree National Park in South Carolina. Huge lightning bug diversity, including the blue ghosts, live in Congaree National Park in South Carolina. And so these are the big three places in North America to see lightning bugs, but you can see them anywhere in Pennsylvania. When to see them, it depends on the weather, but generally it's around the last week of May to the last week of June. That's going to be your window. The adults are only around for a couple of weeks. I always like to tell folks here in Southwest Pennsylvania, it's generally the second week of June is going to be peak, but that does depend on the weather. So they won't flash if there's a heavy rain. They'll be out if it's a mist or a drizzle, but heavy rain, they're going to be stuck on the ground. And they won't flash if the temperature dips below 50 degrees. Ideal temperature is between 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the sweet spot. And if you want to learn more about these insects, these are two books that I'd highly recommend. The first being Fireflies, Glowworms, and Lightning Bugs by Lynn Frierson Faust. Faust is one of the leading experts on lightning bugs. And this book is a phenomenal field guide on how to determine what lives around you and also just about their biology and ecology. And another one would be Silent Sparks by Sarah Lewis, a wonderful read as well, with a lot of useful information on North American lightning bugs. So that's my presentation. We'll open it up to questions, and Beth will give you all my contact information as well. So we'll jump into the Q&A.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for that presentation. So we do have several questions. Excuse me. Let's start with, how many firefly species are there in Pennsylvania?
So it's hard to say because not a lot of people study lightning bugs, but there are roughly 20-ish species in Pennsylvania.
There we go. I'm sorry. I started without your camera being on. So
Yeah, so about 20.
are there other bioluminescent creatures that live in Pennsylvania?
Yes, so there are other bioluminescent insects in North America, not so much in Pennsylvania, but we do have bioluminescent fungi in Pennsylvania. Three species that I can think of right off the bat are Armillaria, commonly known as foxfire, is a fungus where the mycelia, the hairy underground root-like structures, will glow in the dark. Jack-o'-lantern mushrooms, which we have here at Raccoon Creek State Park, those will glow in the dark. And bitter oyster mushrooms will glow in the dark as well. So we have at least three bioluminescent fungi.
That's very interesting. One of the attendees mentioned they have a friend in Minnesota who once told them that fireflies only exist here in Pennsylvania, that they don't have any in Minnesota. But you mentioned there are dark ones. So could they actually have fireflies in Minnesota just without the bioluminescence?
I guarantee that they do. There are absolutely going to be lightning bugs in Minnesota. There are some interesting lightning bugs in the Midwest in general that don't occur anywhere else. Um, some of them can be dark, and the thing about lightning bugs is not a lot of people study them, and we're actually learning that there are more glowing species west of the Mississippi than we previously thought. So it could just be that they're there, not many people encounter them. Maybe people don't notice them, but if nothing else, there definitely are the dark species in Minnesota.
Are fireflies native to Pennsylvania and North America, or are they an introduced species?
All of our species here are native. I don't believe there are any introduced species, but lightning bugs are found across the globe. They're on every continent except Antarctica, but all the ones here in Pennsylvania are native species.
So what animals are predators of fireflies?
So because of that aposematic coloration, so the bright flashing light and the foul tasting chemicals, they don't have a lot of predators. Occasionally bats will eat them, but they generally learn to stay away from them after they have that first bite. Certain bird species will eat them, including nocturnal birds like whippoorwills and nighthawks. But one of the biggest predators of lightning bugs is going to be spiders. They really don't mind the taste. They'll capture them in their webs. So spiders are going to be number one predator.
When is firefly breeding season? How many eggs does a female firefly lay, and how many times can they reproduce?
So for most species, they're only going to reproduce once because those adults only live for a couple weeks at a time. Breeding season is right now. It kind of does depend on the species, but for our flashing fireflies, that's going to be between late May and late June here in Pennsylvania. And as far as how large a clutch of eggs can be, it does depend on the species. Some species only lay one egg at a time. Some can lay up to 300 eggs at a time. It really does depend on the species.
You had given some tips about how to create a positive habitat for the fireflies in your area, or in someone's backyard. Or what type of plants are beneficial to fireflies? Is there a specific species of plant to plant to interest them?
Nothing in particular. I mean, I would always recommend native plants just because of the benefit they provide for other pollinators and other native insects. So as you bring in those other native insects, you are providing a food source for those larval fireflies. So while they don't benefit from specific plants necessarily, they do like to have cover. A lot of them like tall grasses that they can climb up onto and flash, especially the females. So tall perennial grasses are always a good option. But I would just pick something that's native to your area, and you'll get beneficial insects as long as it's a native plant.
So why do the synchronous fireflies flash in unison? And remind us when and where in Pennsylvania we could see that.
So there's only one species of synchronous firefly in Pennsylvania. It's called Photinus caroliniana. And the only spot in Pennsylvania where you can see them is the Allegheny National Forest. They're not really known to exist in Pennsylvania outside of that area. And as far as why they flash in unison, nobody really knows for certain why they do this, but there are a couple of theories. So theory number one is that they all flash at the same time because if there was a cacophony of males all flashing and at various speeds and rates and times, the females can become overwhelmed by that. And it's almost like they get decision fatigue. And so they think to themselves, well, I can't tell who's who. I'm just not going to respond at all. And so the males sort of collaborate and flash in unison. That way, the females have time to react and choose one of them. So it's kind of hedging their bets, working together to hopefully attract at least one female. Another hypothesis is called the beacon hypothesis. And that theory pretty much states that these synchronous fireflies live in areas with really thick vegetation where it could be really tough to see their lanterns. And so by blinking in unison, they produce this much brighter beacon, which can be recognized by females at greater distances. So those are two hypotheses, but nobody knows for sure why they blink in unison.
So that leads to the next question. Are there plans to do more studies on fireflies? Have you heard of upcoming research projects that might be happening?
Well, there are community science resources like the ones I showed you with the Massachusetts Audubon Society and the Firefly Atlas. I would see if your local state parks are doing any programs. Me personally, I'm doing a lightning bug watch tomorrow at Raccoon Creek. It's fully booked, so sorry everybody, it's too late to sign up for that one. But that's not to say that other state parks aren't doing this. And if there's nothing going on in your area, and you have a backyard with lightning bugs, you can organize your own study, and people will use that data to try to determine how many lightning bugs or what species of lightning bugs live in your area.
Thank you to everyone for your questions. Joe, what would you like the audience to remember from today's presentation?
I would just like everyone to know that we have a great diversity of lightning bugs here on the East Coast, and it is our state insect. It's a beautiful insect, a charismatic one that doesn't bite, doesn't sting, produces a beautiful light, and I couldn't think of a better insect to represent the state of Pennsylvania.
Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Please join us for more Learn at Lunchtime programs. Visit the State Museum of Pennsylvania's website at statemuseumpa.org for program information and to sign up.